a Newmark and Planon collaborative webinar brought to you by Newmark and Planon, funnily enough. I'm Adam Green. I'm a Director of Consulting over in Newmark in Europe. And we're here today to talk to you a little bit about hybrid office strategy and an approach to that. With a huge change in real estate at the moment around office use and strategies in this space, driven, of course, by the pandemic. We thought it'd be a great idea to bring to you some thoughts and insights around this topic. And I'm delighted to say today we're joined by two colleagues, I'll call you colleagues, from Planon, who are going to help us sort of take you through this process, this conversation, and provide some further insights and ideas around thinking in this space. So, along with my colleague Michael Kushner, I'd like to introduce you to Eric Jaspers and Bram Arntzen. So, Eric, Bram, do you want to give yourself an introduction to the good people?
Yeah, sure. It's a joy to do that. My name Eric. I've been working with the company for over 20 years now, always in the field of product development, product management, doing currently product strategies. So looking forward to towards the market developments that's taking place and seeing where we have to invest in order to stay relevant in the marketplace.
Fantastic. And Bram?
Yes, well, thank you, Adam, and good morning, everybody. Well, I'm Bram Arntzen, Solution Director for the Smart Workplace Management Solution of Planon. I rejoined Planon a couple of months ago after an absence of 5 years. Well, always been in the facilities and workplace area since I graduated. I've co-written on 2 books, not as many as Eric, unfortunately. not yet, but love to read and talk about it, and I'll work together with my team on the smartest workplace solution.
Fantastic. And for those listeners who don't know, I'm sure you all will, but Planon is a world-leading IWMS solution. And is a fantastic tool used widely around the world. A large global client base providing an integrated platform to deliver services upon which a lot of key operations are conducted. So we're really grateful to have you guys here today and to talk us through the hybrid strategy and all the elements around it. So yeah, much appreciated. So let's get into it, I think. So we're going to talk here around a little bit about sort of the trends we're seeing sort of outside corporate real estate and how they're sort of finding their way into sort of the corporate world. So a few things here that we're probably all familiar with, and again, sort of trends that are emerging. So co-working, we all know the last sort of 10, 20 years, humongous boom in co-working, sort of really triggered by the sort of startup revolution in that space, but obviously being adopted more and more by corporates that need sort of space to house people as they're either in transition or they're considering their options for sort of longer term plans. But a huge boom in co-working. I need to tell you guys about the WeWorks of the world, Rent24s, etc. Sleeves up. There's many of them out there. An industry that got very, very popular very, very quickly. Ghost kitchens is one that I love. I don't know about you guys, but I'm a huge fan of a Wagamama's. Other restaurants are available, but ghost kitchens are a fantastic sort of real estate use where you've got multiple people working in sort of single kitchen, shared utility services, shared resources. Delivering multiple different menu recipes for multiple different restaurant chains and fast food chains, all using a delivery system which we can get via our app with companies like Just Eat and Deliveroo. So yeah, fantastic, and a good example, I guess, of how agility and how sort of shared resources is sort of supporting an industry which has had a humongous boom in the last sort of 5-10 years. And then shared traditional non-space, so something a bit more specialist. Looking at areas where research and development, sort of pharma, biochem, sort of shares resources, shares facilities to do their research, their experiments, their sort of product development. But that sharing economy and that sort of agility that that sort of these locations and these sort of asset types are starting to produce are all elements that are being fed into sort of corporate real estate sort of world. And as we say here, corporate real estate traditionally, and I guess by its nature, has been a fairly sort of rigid asset class. And with the revolution over the past sort of 10, 20 years, workplace revolution, I should say, the agility comes from how those spaces are being used. So huge investment into workplace experience and environments fit to support high-performing teams and support delivery of sort of core business functions, as well as a huge surge in outsourcing, which is set to become multi-trillion-dollar business in the not so sort of near future, if you like. And I guess what we're talking about here, guys, is from an industrial and an industry perspective, and then continuing on with that sort of agile theme. From a Planon perspective, dealing with your clients, what have you guys seen emerge within that sort of corporate space? I guess sort of maybe pre-COVID and sort of post-COVID. What are the sort of things you guys are sort of seeing with your clients, but also in your industry engagements that you guys both are involved in?
Bram, do you go first?
Yes, thanks. I think when I was looking at it, I think if we go back to the core, it is a changing lifestyle actually that has been accelerated in the past months. That has led to a different way of work, the different way of we do things, and that then impacts in the end real estate. So if you have a pretty rigid way of working, then real estate has a very clear purpose. But now the way of working is changing fastly. And so has to do real estate, and I think that's the challenge here then.
Well, yeah, to add to that, perhaps, because interesting thing is I saw in a pre-COVID situation, of course, that you already had this balancing notion of a lean approach to workplace, but also taking into account how to balance that with elements of productivity. And you saw this conversation taking place, of course, in the market already, leading to new principles like co-working and stuff like that. Do you need to own it? Are you going to use it and pay per use or something like that? So it was it's this interesting combination. On the one hand, a more lean approach to workplace, the spend on it, combined with elements of productivity and social structure. And I believe indeed, as you say, Bram, that the COVID situation is accelerating some of those developments more than anything else. It's the flexibility elements of where people work at what time for what purpose is being accelerated actually today by the COVID situation, because we just have to. How it is going to be going forward, that's of course, for some of us, we'll probably know some elements and we'll probably talk about it today. And some elements, for me, myself, I'm pretty honest. Some of it we will not know today. We'll still have to discover, I think.
I think that's a really good point, right? And I think a lot of the conversations around sort of phrases like the new normal, things like that. And I think we spoke about it sort of recently, Eric, around the expectation that there will be some sort of stability, whether it's normal or not, is up for debate. But I guess to both your point and Bram's point here is the flexibility is the key. And I guess the workplace is in a way sort of trying to maybe not rediscover itself, but sort of understand how in the short term and the midterm, how it fits and how it best serves its employees. And I guess, with everyone being told to sort of grab their laptops and go home in sort of February, March this year, immediately it's sort of thrust into its sort of an unknown sort of area. I mean, it's been such a prevalent tool. It's been such a talked about aspect of sort of business strategy in recent years, and all of a sudden it's being told to a degree that 37% didn't need it to begin with, and actually 56% in the future actually say, well, I don't need it all the time. So it's sort of rediscovering its value. Will it need to flex and pivot to sort of rediscover its sort of benefit to employees, and how will it sort of change to sort of support that? But these aren't new trends, right? I mean, we know that working from home isn't new. I guess all of us on this call have been doing it for a while, a mix of the two, but neither is sort of co-working or hub and spoke models piece. But I guess what I've sort of always landed on is that in this scenario that we currently face, maybe these have come sort of full circle, especially sort of hub and spoke regional office model. I've spent some time on some really interesting and not so interesting business parks around the UK in my career. But maybe it's sort of come full circle with a bit of a renewed purpose, and maybe we can leverage these models now in this current situation, and maybe in the next sort of 1 to 5 years as we start to get to a level of stability, to provide a space for people to go to, not to find sanctuary, but I guess just to focus and do work, to have a bit of belonging, see people collaborate, innovate where they need to, and complement that real drive in sort of digital work from anywhere, and that's sort of been thrust upon us. I think I saw a graph the other day that said, so Teams, for example, I think that most of us use Teams, right? Since February, March this year, I think Teams use went up something like 894%, which is absolutely, which is huge, and that's not
Right.
not including things like Slack and other solutions, right? But I mean, how have you guys sort of handled it in sort of Planon, and how are you seeing that out there? I mean, we use those tools all the time in Newmark to make sure we're globally connected. But I think more than ever, sort of those collaborative tools in sync with the workplace have become critical, right?
Well, it's interesting. In fact, companies like Gartner have been talking about the digital workplace for multiple years now, of course. So now we actually see it emerging as basically the connector between the different physical spaces. In terms of the home office, I think it's massively interesting to see what's happening today with everyone working from home. But it's a kind of emergency situation that we're basically coming into. If you go to the work from home as a structural element, I actually believe that a large part of what's now being accepted as working from home will no longer be possible, because the home office does not always provide the kind of quality and let's say health conditions that you would need for an employee to stay healthy working from home. So I certainly believe that we will see new regulations around when does an organization accept a workplace from home as a structural element, so it becomes almost part of its own capacity, and you'll have to figure out the services around the home. And that's what we're thinking about today, as how to support that from our end in an IWMS system, both in capacity planning, but also in managing those workplaces at home. And at the other side, as you stated already, Adam, the regional office, the spike model, probably you will see some elements there of attractiveness indeed for people who cannot structurally work from home to move into those regional offices more and more. Because I certainly believe that spreading the capacity of workplaces is going to be a structural element. We'll talk about it later in this conversation as well, I think.
And we need to take into account that various companies already announced that, let's say, the remote work should be part for, let's say, their work area or workspace forever.
Yeah, I suppose there's that strategy, right, Michael? You make a really good point there. I guess it's already starting to become a more integral part of the overall strategy. I think even in the UK, right, we're seeing some fairly large organisations already adopt, at least a hybrid model, and even sort of across Europe. I think a great example, Standard Chartered have had a fantastic approach to their approach with hub and with a hybrid model. British Telecom as well, fantastic approach there. BASF is a great one, even sort of utilising sort of space as revenue streams as well, and there's great articles out there if anyone wants to go and have a look around sort of how those companies are using their space and what they're doing in terms of their hybrid approach. It's really fascinating.
Right.
But I guess, right, I think there's also other elements to take into account. You make an interesting point, Eric, around the home office. So for our operational listeners and those focusing on the practical elements of sort of day-to-day management, whatever happened to DSE assessments, desk assessments, health and safety assessments, making sure you're sat at your desk properly, you've got an optimal environment to work in. Does that responsibility for well-being of people sat in their home offices extend from the workplace to those locations into people's homes? Do we seeing a a new industry arise where we've got remote DSE assessments, or furniture deliveries, or a reallocation of corporate real estate budgets that people can spend on their own desk and their own chairs that have to fit inside a certain sort of specification.
Right.
All those different things. And we are seeing those. We know people are doing that, and we're seeing sort of the what's the right word? Devolvement or allocation of sort of CRE budgets to the individual to spend as they see fit in their location. So all that stuff is fascinating.
Right. Yeah.
I have read in a press release of a US tech company who also stated to use the remote work as forever, that they want to allocate some part of their budget for each remote worker.
Yeah, you'll have
Great.
You'll have to. You can't do anything else, of course, because, and it's partly then becoming a productized kind of thing. It's something that factors into your capacity planning as well, and you need to understand where those locations actually are as well. So it's in terms of information management, it sets a new stage as well in terms of how you basically can model workplace in a real estate and workplace management type of scenery, and that's something we're working around today.
And on the other hand, what we have learned during this year is that there are a lot of, let's say, new developments around our corporate world. So especially the World Economic Forum announces the 20-minute neighborhood.
Yeah.
Where you have everything, let's say, on one local place. And so especially when we're talking about that hybrid model here, there will be a huge impact on the corporate real estate, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really good. It's really important, right? And we're also seeing, you talk about that sort of total, and there's something that you talk about it all day, right? But there's some sort of more complex elements of it as well. Is though, do corporations have to account for their entire sort of real estate footprint to include, a standard measure of home office in their measures? Can corporations relinquish, their tax elements or accounting elements because they can reduce their sort of corporate floor space or usable space and offset an element of that with home locations, or will they be asked to account for that as well when it comes to IFRS 16 or FASB? Who knows? There's all these discussions, right? Not yet, exactly. Not yet, but maybe I've just twigged someone off to think about that. And I apologize to all corporations around the world, but it's these sorts of conversations that are being had, right? Because if you're working from home, utility subsidies, accounting for that space, delivery of furniture, the maintenance, and making sure that's sort of fit for purpose. I suppose the other element is that whilst being at home is nice, is being at home fit for purpose, and is it contributing to your well-being? The well-being and mental and social elements of this have been well documented in the news, right? Around people, lockdown being the primary thing, not being able to get out from a personal perspective, but back in March, I think I live alone, so I was locked down early, working from home early anyway. So before the lockdown sort of kicked in, I've been in my home office for 2 weeks. Add 2 weeks on to 3 months of lockdown. I'm not going to lie, I was climbing the walls, guys. And that's someone who's used from working from home. Imagine those who had working from home thrust upon them. So it's critical, and I guess that ties us into our next sort of guidance slide, which is around the elements of the office that basically mean it's going to live on, right? Social interaction, productivity, innovation. I'd love to hear from you guys around your views on why the office will be critical moving forward, even if it will be in a new format or a new beast.
Adam, you raised something with that very important, and I guess when we look on that poll, what we have, that not 100% wants to work remotely is often caused by the case that they miss the physical contact with colleagues and superiors. And this is what makes us human. And Eric, you stated during our introduction that's not recorded, why you are still in the office. So,
yeah, of course. I think it coming back into the office. It's of course we are social animals, so to say. I would like to go back to 2013. And it was an interesting conversation in the workplace community at the time when the CEO of Yahoo, Marissa Mayer, basically asked all their staff to come back to the office. That was the time where working from home was in its first wave. And what they actually sensed at that time is that the working from home, although great, was basically hurting them in terms of their social structure, the social interactions between their developers, because Yahoo, of course, is a software company. And so actually she said, well, I would like all our employees to come back to the central facilities in order to restructure that social coherence that you need as a company as well to go forward. And I think that will always be the role of central facilities that are branded for the company as well and being fitted out to fit their purpose as well as their culture. That you have these places of home that you go back to, and that's basically I live 10 minutes from this facility, so I drive easily. And we have, of course, all precautions installed there with our own applications as well. So you have to check in beforehand. If the capacity is is down, you can't go in anymore. And that kind of thing is already arranged. But I still like to go back in order to experience the contacts with colleagues and stuff like that as well.
And what I personally see, maybe Bram, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but as you said, Eric, in 2013 with the Yahoo example, it was, let's say, more or less driven by the management. Right now, that has somehow flipped. So currently, it's not a decision by the companies what they want to do. So if they want to compete in the war for talent, then, and if they want to win in that war, then they have to unite somehow both worlds for the employees, as they want sometimes in that way and sometimes in another way. Or what do you say, Bam?
Yeah, 100%. And I think the employee is now in the driver's seat. And if you indeed, as an employer, wants to retain and attract the best talents, you should really understand why and which choices do your employees and also your future employees make. Because for me, it is all about extension of choices. So in the traditional office environment, you didn't had a choice, really. You had one type of workplace and you just did there. I'd had meetings, so collaborative work or focused work. And you had basically two types of workplaces. But on general, it was a central facility. Then, of course, the whole activity-based working came in, and then the extent of choices, the number of choices was already extended a bit, but still all from a office environment. And now, indeed, it is not by the top-down or a management decision that the number of choices has been extended. It is a big external factor, but it in the end, so after COVID, you should have a model that has the best, basically the best of everything, that allows your best employees to choose whatever they would like to choose. And there's the funny thing, and I've also seen it a bit at myself actually. Even when in the period in the past months that we were allowed to go back to the office, you sometimes just don't do it, and you simply don't really know always why. Because you might have very legitimate reasons to go to the office, because you want to meet your team, or you have an important meeting or so. But then there are several other reasons why you prefer still keep working from home. Maybe because it is about the kids, or it's about private appointments, or whatsoever. So it is very important to on the one hand, try to understand why certain choices are being made. Do I want to go to satellite office? Do I want to go to HQ? Do I stay at home, third office, or whatsoever? But on the other hand, I can imagine that you don't want to overanalyze it, because we're not robots. So even though you can have certain profiles and personas like we're seeing here, we're not robots. So Jane perhaps will make on Tuesday 3 weeks after that Monday for that's what I find them really interesting and really get my head around. But let's have a look at Jane.
Right? Let's have a look at Jane. So Jane is just our bank worker who's been working for a bank for 5 years. And what we want to try and do here is maybe have a think about the drivers. And we've talked about it before. You made an interesting point, Bram, just before we flipped over to, when you could go back to the office, you didn't. And, it'd be interesting to understand, how many people are being influenced still by the external factors around that. So even though you have a workplace that you like, you have the ability to get there yourself and to go and do the work there, checking in a safe and controlled way, there were maybe still external factors that were maybe putting you off going back. And I guess that's the element, right? So it's an element of, I guess fear is a bit of a strong word, but I guess fear or confidence, perhaps, given the fact that, until we managed to wipe out this virus in any sort of major way, there will always be an apprehension, maybe to get on a train or get on a bus, maybe drive yourself or walk or cycle, when you have control of your sort of peripheral environment, that's fine. But mass transit into cities, there'll always be something maybe just for the time being that's going to put you off. Sort of going back, but I wanted to mention a quote from a former CEO of mine, and I use this all the time. It's probably going to get a bit old, but he said a while back when I was listening to a talk that in the normal world, he appreciated that employees have to employees can work from home, choose to work from home for a degree. They'll be out sort of traveling to clients. They'll be operating on client sites. But he said that even if they're away from the office, they should miss something. And if they miss something in the office, that's the sign of a really, truly great workplace. And I guess now, it's always sort of stayed with me as a sort of the shortest summary of such a poignant topic. And I guess now what we're finding is that workplace, it's not in a battle, but it has to once again elevate itself to become so attractive or so fit for purpose that it has to, at least in the short term, fight off any sort of nervousness or apprehension around sort of traveling to it. And that comes with time, and that comes with process, and it comes with a standard approach. But if we get into sort of the storyboard of Jane and trying to position it in sort of its basic form, people love their jobs, right? Most people, if you're blessed to love your job, then you'll go to the end of the earth to deliver it. And it's not just the work you do; it's the people around you, it's the cultural identity, which is often reinforced by physical space, right? A building, an office, is a physical manifestation of a company's culture. Right. If you like, and it's designed, it's designed to sort of support and promote that. But elements come into play, like we said before. Missing the team, missing collaboration. We did a poll prior to this, and out of sort of 3 options, I think we had cultural identity, innovation, collaboration, and productivity. The 3 options. I think 67% of respondents. In the early days, and it shot up massively. We'll have to check it again and see where it's at now. But 67% of folks said that the most important reason to go back was collaboration and innovation. And that's interesting, right? Because we've heard in the news that some of the bigger corporates, Amazon, some tech companies, Facebook, are missing those coffee conversations, those corridor interactions, where for them a lot of their great ideas come from. And they're not having those. And and workspace can be designed to guide people into collaboration points where they can talk to people they wouldn't usually talk to meet up with sort of work colleagues and work friends, and that's being missed because people aren't in that space, experiencing all that space. Not only they're not experiencing that space, they're also not taking advantage of the millions and millions of dollars that have been pumped into it to support their working day. And talking sort of bluntly, I don't think organisations will want that investment to go to waste or not be utilised, even 9 months after it's not being sort of adopted in the way it was designed to, with all the workplace strategy sort of work that's been going on there as well. And another, again, I'm going to keep on throwing the quotes in here as well. Roy Abernathy, who leads our consulting business, is a heavy hitter in the workplace world in the US, and with a survey that he was involved in. Employees were asked to name 3 primary colours that they experience in their workplace. So 3 colours. So it could be the walls, could be the desk, could be the carpet, whatever. They couldn't remember the colour of their offices or their workplaces. So it doesn't take long to disengage from an environment, right? Which is a bit scary.
Yes.
Fascinating point.
And Adam, actually, you touched a couple of seconds ago a very important topic here, and I think it was 2 years ago or so, when I read a research on employee retention, and that research says, well, the main reason, or the biggest reason why people stay in their company is because they have friends there. So, it was a very HR-related research, but it says, of course, no matter what workplace you provide, if it's, of course, all hygiene factors should be there. It should be clean.
Yeah, it should be clear. I think we're losing you a little bit, Bram. But yeah, I think what you're saying should be clean, should be controlled. Yep, you're back on.
Yeah. Yep, I am. Yeah. So the number of friends. So you can have the fanciest and the best office, but without friends.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's really important. The relationships you build in the workplace, work colleagues very quickly become friends, and then that brings a whole other conversation, which we can't get into now, but maybe part 2 could control. But think about the periphery of a workplace, right? People go to cities, they go to their workplace to access things that aren't in their immediate home sort of environment. So they go out for drinks after work, they go for dinner after work, they might go to the gym on the way to work. All these things they do on the way to the office and after work. They're missing out on that, and it's demographic. Demographics are different priorities. So you have youngsters that go into listen to me, I'm only 33. Younger employees that go into the city to have that lifestyle, that social interaction, and to work in sort of big statement buildings with great workplace environments. They're missing that at the moment, and other people, maybe different drivers, younger families commuting in, they've got a different set of priorities. But they're not getting to access that at the moment, which is a bit of a challenge. But I guess before we move on for Jane, I think the idea is
exactly, Adam, and
right?
Bram, Adam, I have the feeling that you like the office world more than your remote location right now. So from my point of view, what we need to state here is that we are all individuals, and I guess this is something that you can agree as well, that it differs from time to time. As you said, Bram, sometimes you have the option to go to the office, but you like the office, but you stay at home because you have some appointments, etc., anything else. And especially the fact that we are individuals, there are a lot of people, and there's also a huge community when we're looking, let's say, into IT and gaming, who can create that kind of community and collaboration on a virtual base. So, and that's, from my point of view, also something very important outcome of this year. A lot of companies and their employees have learned this year to collaborate virtually. So this is a remote working framework that has somehow established and can drive again the situation or the concept for a new working world.
Yeah.
Or Eric, what's What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, well, it's the mix of personal preference and situation in terms of where you want to work. What I see happening, and I think that is new to this induced by this COVID situation, is actually from a more business standpoint. So let's say from a real estate management standpoint, is what I saw very interesting developments is two examples on the national news here. Was the example of 3M, which is producing mouth masks, which are in high demand, of course. Now, what they experienced in their activities globally is that some governments tried to retain the production of those products that were in high demand in their own region. And they saw this risk, and I've been talking to real estate directors of some of our multinational customers as well, stating the same thing. What they learned from this COVID global situation is that they're going to be actively spreading production on a global level. In order to have a fallback on legislation being put out when a certain situation would again occur in this context. Now, if you look at that, what they're doing with production is not very different from what we're doing with knowledge work in offices, creating a deliberate spread of locations where you're going to work. And basically, in terms of where you can plan production, we cannot just, as we just have been discussing in the workplace on knowledge work, you cannot really plan where people are going to work on a daily basis because there's going to be some freedom of choice. And that's, I think it's a good thing. But the challenge is going to be, what's the right mix? Where am I going to put my investments into? In what region? In terms of what type of facilities? In what quantities? And what type of workplace concepts are we going to deploy there?
Yeah, and especially to forecast the demand. So now your supply changed, as you said, when you take all these remote working locations into account, your supply changed.
Yeah.
So how do you forecast your demand? So
yeah, it's funny that you say that because one of the things I actually wonder whether it's quite helpful or not, I'm probably not in my mind, is that we seem to talk sometimes about the new now. And it's my impression that the new now doesn't exist. It will be in future as fluid as it has been before. And the challenge of real estate and workplace people will be to understand what the dynamics for their companies are going to be. And basically be as proactive as possible to put forward the right and the appropriate mix of workplace to facilitate that work going forward. And that will be quite different for different types of companies, of course, which are going to behave differently also after COVID. But it's going to be as fluid as it was before. In my mind, there's no stability going forward.
That's a really good point, right? And I think, all the fluid drivers is probably a good way of saying it, right? There's going to be, this flexibility, this fluidity is going to be around for at least the next sort of 5 years. There'll be an element of stability, but that's only a luxury that will be afforded by companies that have a sort of static operating base. You can't, manufacturing, logistics, they've got to get out there, they've got to do their things. Healthcare, civil servants operating, governments, they have to work. So, it's maybe not a luxury, but it's an option that is afforded by a subset of industry, and within industries, only a subset of the workforce that can benefit from it.
Right.
And I guess the drivers are different, and we've got Dave here as well. So we have Jay, now we have Dave. Just try and position sort of how those drivers sort of influence real estate, and Eric touches on it, really, really well in what you've just said. So his driver now is to achieve fluidity and flexibility in whatever capacity he can, save costs, sort of make sure what locations he has, are being used in the right way, utilized in the right way, and he can keep an eye on them in terms of sort of compliance, and making sure they're fit for purpose moving forward. And ultimately, his drivers, may be in a basic way looking at saving cost, providing the new workspace model, which could be hybrid, could be something else for him in the future, depending on his, like Eric says, the industry type that he's representing or supporting. And trying to sort of make sure that complements the new strategy, work from home, work from anywhere, what a percentage, the company wants to sort of target. But I think you're right, Eric. I think it's going to remain very fluid for a period of time. And I guess the other question comes into play is, will companies pay a premium in the short term for that flexibility when it comes to real estate? So more expensive but more flexible leases that mitigate risk for both the business but also the landlord, perhaps.
Yeah, well, it's one element. This kind of, why do you pay insurance?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's probably an element that will be structural to it. I think for Dave going forward, we're of course now very much focused on this global COVID situation. But I certainly believe part of that fluidity going forward will be sustainability. Where we see developments, for instance, in Europe with the Green Deal, which is now on the backside of things, of course, because we have more urgent matters to attend to, probably. If you look at the US, where the change of government probably is returning to Paris agreements and that kind of thing, I certainly believe that the focus is going to be, after this COVID situation is behind us, around more integral, sustainable operations, which is quite important for the real estate, because 40% of CO2 emissions comes from buildings. So the real estate function has a big role to play. I don't know how it factors out. I don't know how you look at that, Adam, going forward, and Michael, in terms of what transactions you will be expecting to happen when we want to be more sustainable in our daily operations going forward.
I think it's going to be a mix, right? We're still seeing large transactions take place, bigger locations, especially over in the US for sure. And from a brokerage perspective, we hope that continues. But I guess the varying elements now is that, to find companies the right space, it's not just about sort of transaction management. It's about making sure they have the right space for their talent pools, for their business operations, and helping drive their sort of core approach to what they do as a business. But I guess, will locations become more desirable for companies because they are economically constructed? Do they have a green rating? You got LEED sort of measures on ratings on buildings now as well. Is there going to be an enhancement in new economic or new sustainability measures for constructed buildings? Will one building that has those sort of elements to it, whether it be sort of sustainability, energy utilization, efficiency, what materials they're constructed about, will those sorts of buildings tip the battle in terms of location strategy? Probably yes. As people make more informed, more sort of social, environmentally informed choices, then perhaps we're going to start to see more and more of a fight for locations, where the very building sort of construction operation is a key element, which of course it is now to a degree, but even more so as we we try and support this. I think the green recovery, I think the UK is calling it as well, the green recovery, right? We'll see some elements around that for sure. But also, what's the benefit of having sort of smaller, more energy efficient locations in a hybrid model than having one larger location, which lets heat escape, people have to commute to in trains and in diesel and petrol cars, whereas from a hybrid perspective, you can have smaller, more efficient locations closer to your employee base, that people can walk to, that they can cycle to, that they can drive to in their electric vehicle without any range anxiety. Is it actually that as we go through sort of the initial strategy, hybrid strategy, and we find out what we want to do, is the 20-minute, 50-minute city concept an even more realistic reality? It's hard because people are dispersed so sort of widely through their own choice. But are we seeing that, Michael? Do you think?
And Adam, what we take into account as well is, on one hand, the utilization of a building, and what happens currently this year with huge buildings where we want to achieve a social, or not a social, some kind of physical distance between each employees. So the goal behind this is that you have business continuity. If you have smaller locations, then you can go for business continuity as well, but hopefully with a better utilization. And from a sustainability approach, as you said, Adam, right, commuting is depending on the sustainability label, often one part of the rating.
Mhm.
And I guess you will agree that a building that is fully utilized is better than a building where, let's say, only 20% are utilized.
Yeah, and you're right. And will lead and Leesman and those measures, new measures come into play to support those locations and their attractiveness. And I guess this all feeds into Newmark's approach to supporting those customers that have reached out to us around sort of the sort of hybrid, doing the data-driven hybrid strategy is what we're sort of looking at here. So making an informed choice based on all the factors we've just discussed for the last sort of half an hour, all the social elements, all the industry focus elements, the risk elements, the sort of green recovery elements, the new drivers, employee-driven workplace demands. And these are all elements to take into account, right? So we'll just talk quickly about this. Before we get into the sort of technology piece, which I'm really interested in. So we look at a fundamental foundational start, which is looking at commute scenarios, but we flip it a little bit. We don't say, right, my office is here, that I want to put a location in the city. We say, right, okay, well, no, my current location is here, my employees are now here, where is the best place for me to satisfy their office needs with a hybrid scenario? So it's a traditional approach, but you look at it a bit differently with the employees now driving it. And you look at the transit piece, you then lay into the model things like amenities, electric charge points, gyms, cash points, places to eat. So you might align your workplace experience applications to access those amenities as well, and onboard those so your employees can access them digitally, either on the way to the office, within the office, or during their sort of downtime, lunchtime, immediately afterwards, those sorts of elements. And you give that impact back to the clients, they can make a better informed decision around that. And then based on that analysis, again, nothing new, just a classic foundational review around it. You then look at some of the newer elements come into play. So cost is not a new element. We all know that it needs to be cost efficient, but we know in this scenario, for example, we've just spoken about with Eric, that we'll probably see a premium, right? And that insurance analogy is great, Eric. I think I've not heard that before, but you're paying a premium. The insurance is the premium you're paying for that flexibility, and that flexibility is the insurance. And I think that's a great way of putting it. So if you need to flex, condense, or expand, on a sixpence, you have the contractual flexibility to do so because you're paying for that luxury, if you like. And that helps you to look at employee satisfaction as well. So expanding, contracting, relocating, adding more locations if you need to, all to better serve that business as that sort of confidence returns to people moving back into the locations, and you find out what the true want and need of your employees is. Everything we're doing now is by surveys, right? Surveys and questioning and asking people. The reality is, once locations become more available and people get sort of more confident, we might see an even bigger return to the office as a result of that. I know I'm certainly looking forward to getting back into the office as well, but also you're extending your corporate image into locations that embody your culture. You're enabling space for collaboration, innovation, which of course our poll is telling us is the sort of key driver to get back. And that is people sitting down with people, talking with people, and looking at products and ideas and doing it together. So clearly there is a humongous social aspect to that as well. But of course, alongside that as well, another benefit, we've talked about it previously, is around risk. You have more locations, you have more agility. You have the ability to access space should we ever experience another, let's call it natural disaster, or another event, let's call it event. And I know Eric, we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Will the next time something like this happens, will sort of senior leaders in business and industry be as forgiving as they have been in this scenario, that they would expect very quickly that their business is more resilient should there be another event, whether it be a pandemic or a natural disaster or an economic issue. They want to make sure they have that agility in there as well. But it has to align to the organizational strategy on workplace as well. So space and work from home, work from anywhere. Getting the right balance is critical, and workplace organizations can support in those metrics and find that right balance. And then all of a sudden you've got more locations, so you've got to acquire them, you've got to set them up, you've got to embody your spirit and your culture into them, you've got to train your employees how to use it, both from a sort of business process and operations perspective, but also through technology, being able to control the safe return and the management of those locations as well. And then maybe you have to tweak some of your existing processes to support that across your organization. So it's all that sort of chain in there, and people will have alliances with corporate real estate businesses that can help them do that. I know we certainly are. So it's not a simple process. There's still work to be done in it, but the benefits, obviously sort of clearly outweigh the cons and the work required if you want to deliver that service to your employees. And again, we said before, we're seeing major organizations do that alongside their work from home sort of policies as well. But where we really want to get to is this piece, is the manage and monitor. And I'm looking to our esteemed guests from Planon here around this area. But what we're talking about here is, I'm a real estate director, head of corporate real estate. So I have my hybrid strategy implemented. I have more locations. I want my people to use them in the right way to sort of support their working day, but also to support the core business operation. So I want to make sure that I can find these buildings, I can create building profiles, I can onboard them to a platform, I can manage all these new flexible, agile leases and space agreements that we now find ourselves in, and I'm paying a premium for them. So I want to make sure I'm not getting caught out on them, but also make sure locations are being utilized in the right way, so I can see who is using it, why they're using it, what they're using it for, how and when, so that I can understand actually, that hybrid location, in that location is working in the right way, and it's providing what people need based on the insights I'm seeing. Or the one over here is not working as well. Actually, there's more of a demand for collaboration space. So what I'll do is I'll relinquish the focused desk space, for example, and I'll create more collaboration areas within that, because that's the primary use, or vice versa. And it's those sorts of things. So love to understand from a platform capability perspective, and it's probably not a new thing, but I know there's capabilities within inside the solutions you have to support in that, whether it's the core IWMS platform or the application of the right IoT. I think from a Planon perspective, you guys cover a lot of this in your platform, and you're doing it yourselves in your own office, Eric, as well, aren't you?
Yeah. Actually, what you state here is where we see a key activity for ourselves and key contribution as well. What you now see happening with this higher dispersion of workplaces and stuff like that, you really need to understand what's actually happening. So the role of data, which we of course talk about in digitization, is indeed becoming more and more important. And as we are working towards, and actually have been implementing today, is the IWMS in this fashion has a new role to play. It is by connecting up the digital profile of buildings, how they are going to be used, but also how they perform, is being more and more important for portfolio managers to actually understand what's actually happening, so you can make your predictions on what you actually need in terms of capacity, how the buildings operate also in terms of sustainability and stuff like that as well, so you can benchmark the different buildings that you are running in your portfolio towards each other and place investment decisions based on that data. And I think important, I don't know whether you're aware of it, but Schneider Electric just took a minority shareholdership in Planon. And that's where you see the building technologies and OT, operating technologies, merge with the IT into one basically holistic view of how buildings and portfolios are operating for our customers. I think that's the logic behind it. That's why we see Schneider taking a shareholder a share into Planon itself, because we see that logic. These worlds are coming together, and that's basically technology application and providing insights that you are going to use to manage the portfolios. That's in workplace as well, I guess. That's an intrinsic part of that.
Yeah, very interesting. I think it's, you're right, those two worlds coming together is critical. And I suppose, technology is there to support physical actions and physical attributes of a business, and doing that in the right way directly contributes to, not only sort of employee output, productivity, experience, but also, producing your products and your buildings are an intrinsic part of that process. Buildings can make business, right? They're designed to support and enhance that.
Right, but also into your previous point, understanding how the dynamics are of employees choosing where to work and when to stay at home, where to work, and what kind of capacity draw it takes on the distributed portfolio that you're going to look at, the different modes of servicing that, and understanding where you are going to invest into going forward. That is going to be a play of data, first understanding it by the use of data. And that's where we as IWMS players are playing a very important role in the future, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think the other piece is just to sort of maybe bring it back down a level is, once this investment has been done, if you're going forward with a hybrid strategy, you're looking to justify that spend as well to senior management. You're looking to say, look, we've done this, it's doing what it's meant to be doing. We can see that from the data. So they're informed insights. So I can't be physically on all these locations myself, and I'm only one sort of head of real estate. But what I can see from my connected locations through my platforms is that people are reserving in the right way. They're adhering to the guidelines. The work types we're seeing are is more collaboration than focused in location A, but location B, actually, we're seeing more focused work time here. So we're delivering what's needed, and if we need to flex and pivot, then we can do. And we have that resilience in our portfolio, both to support now, but also in the future. And I think risk and resilience is a key element of this. And we've looked at this very much sort of in a regional sort of focus, sort of geography level. But I know, Eric, you've been looking at this and talking sort of within the industry bodies around this at a much sort of higher global level, and looking at some of the sort of maybe wider international elements that could be taken into account when looking at these things. And I think we call this the happy slide, because it's very happy. But it's critical, right, Eric? It's key elements that people have to consider when they're operating on a global scale.
I think we do. One of the first things we started doing when this hit us in March is trying to understand what's actually happening. And how does it potentially impact our customers' business as well. And so, of course, it started with the COVID situation. But if you get to think around it, it's actually that we used to have a kind of notion that we would control nature. And that we would do our thing as humans as we saw fit, and basically almost unharmed by whatever nature could put in front of us. Now, what COVID has learned us, of course, that this is certainly not the case, and that we should be responsive to what's happening around us and what nature puts forward to us. And there are different elements of threat that are being put forward. And when you look at it on a global scale, go to California, for instance, where you see that fires are, of course, a much bigger threat than in the UK or in Europe for businesses. And you have the flooding situations, of course, Tornado Alley, it's there. So, but the thing is, when you analyze it, they are regional and threat levels vary over time. Now I go back to what Michael just said. It's always better to have a maximum use of your capacity of your building. So the maximum use is always the most efficient. When you look at it like this, in this perspective, the question is, what is maximum capacity? Might it be that capacity varies over time as a result of the situation around the facilities as you come across? Now, the thing is, when this COVID situation hit us, it was a surprise to all of us. And it resulted actually in facilities being completely empty, still costing the money they did. And that was, of course, a forgivable situation because it was a first timer for all of us. The question is, however, how will that be next time? So is there anything we can do to prepare to respond in better ways to an emergency situation going forward in the future? And that's some of the elements of our thinking around it. So if you go to the next slide, the thing is, what we have been having our heads around, we did some articles in the Corporate Real Estate Journal, I think, as well, on the subject, and with IFMA as well, is that it was what we actually said is what we see happening today is when there's no threat at all, when it's a normal situation, and you go to maximum efficiency. And that's normal operations. And what we experienced is what happened when this COVID situation hit, but also incurred by other kind of natural situations, is that that you need to go into a different type of mode of operation when a situation occurs around the building. And I recall, for instance, in the Netherlands, there was a demand for toilet paper because it was in short supply, and cleaning materials in order to disinfect stuff, So in order to address the situation as was occurring, people were going to behave differently. But organizations also had to basically prescribe how to change the cleaning scenarios and that kind of thing. It's all that kind of stuff. And we were, of course, at Bram's in Bram's field, you were having a set of office structures in order to implement that social distancing, making sure that there are not too many people in the building. Now, what we analyzed is that in these types of situations, it's not a stable thing. You go up and down as fast as possible. You want to be efficient again. So there's three elements that need to be attended to. It's the behaviors of people, work at home, for instance, in this COVID situation, the change in services that you have to provide. If there's no one in the facility, in the central facility anymore, what are you going to do with catering? And three is can we disperse in types of locations? That was, of course, the element, a key element of the conversation today, is can we go to locations where there's less harm? Now, next slide. And that's something we have our heads around. Can we assist our customers by the use of our system to basically run protocols to basically respond in appropriate ways to situations as occurring at the location where it needs to be done? Because COVID might be a global one. In China today, the problems are much less, and they are in a different operating mode today as they were half a year ago. So, and this is of course just a picture to convey the idea. There's nothing realistic about it. But when there's a situation of a regional situation as marked by the orange area, looking at where people can work, looking at where you are managing facilities, if you understand it, then you can have prepared your response in advance. You can be much more effective in taking the right precautions and the right measures at the right time, at the right locations, in order to support the resilience of the organization. Because you want to go back to most efficient operations only in the context when it is safe to do so. So, and that's something we're working around at Planon today. We'll probably be putting out some capability in the platform going forward to allow our customers to prepare for that next situation, which has two elements. It's regional and it's temporary. And that's very important. So that's also why I say it's not so helpful to talk about a new now, because that new now will be a fluid thing anyway. And it's better to prepare for that fluidness than to make conceptions of what that new now is going to be. And that's our thinking today in the realm of resilience. And yeah. I think your approach to the diversification of locations where you can work is a big help in resilience, in planning for resilience, because you provide the flexibility and the options to move your activities in the future as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know?
Yeah,
And,
brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So I think in summary, just conscious of time, we don't want to go too far, but I think just to summarize, we are definitely in a fluid mode. There's no doubt about that, and I agree completely in that the stability or the new normal, the new now will change its face over the next sort of 5 years or so as we start to get some stability and buildings and workplace sort of rediscover themselves and realign to the new drivers, which of course we talked about today being employee driven, but also social, economical, and sort of global impacts as well as Eric's just talked about. And and our hybrid model is one way within which we're seeing companies mitigate that risk, provide for their customers, and also provide for their employees, and more people are looking at that as well. So it's certainly one that can add that sort of element of risk mitigation, as well as sort of providing the workplace, the culture, the brand identity, and the flexibility for the workforce moving forward. So yeah, a really fascinating discussion, guys. Really good. And as we sort of bring it to a close, I'd just like to say a big thank you to you both for joining us, and to Michael as well, for contributing to the discussion. And we all hope that our listeners have found some value in our insights on conversation. And of course, if you want to reach out to myself or our colleagues from Planon to discuss further, or to talk about how we can help you in your search for your new normal and your strategy moving forward, then our details are here. But again, thank you, Eric. Thank you, Bram. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you back.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Brilliant. And we hope to hear you guys on a webinar with us again soon, but also thank you to our listeners, and we hope to see you again soon as well on another webinar. And we'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
And cut.
Hey.